Financial responsibility takes a dive.
We're burdened with the Pine and Turnbull legacy, a ludicrous submarine program. $50 billion B for billion. Forget it. That's if you're lucky. By the way, this is borrowed money. There's been no public accountability for the cost or the benefit. $50 billion is at the lower end. Some say the end cost could be $130 billion. This was to save 3 Liberal seats in South Australia and save Turnbull's prime ministership. $40 billion a seat. And by the way, the first of them won't be delivered until the 2030s. We'll have a very serious capability gap of several years when Australia may have no operational submarines at all. What a legacy. Who's going to pick up the tab? Gary Johnson has called this a flawed process that resulted in the costliest and most risky acquisition approach possible over an unacceptable time frame. There was no competitive process between 2 or 3 contractors. We could have bought these things off the shelf from Germany or Japan or France 30% cheaper. But here's the rub. These things are nuclear powered, not diesel. French Barracuda submarines. And these will have to be retrofitted and redesigned with a diesel piston engine. And no one in the history of submarine construction has tried to convert a nuclear submarine to a diesel one. Well, Gary Johnson hasn't fallen off his chair, but he, like us, is a taxpayer. He must feel as if he wants to fall off the chair. He's right here beside me. Gary.
Good evening, Alan, and thank you for having me on your program. Good evening, Graham. The government doesn't seem to have enough money to drought-proof this country, but it's got plenty of money to squander on submarines at the most exorbitant price in history. I don't know whether you're aware, but the Naval Group has now decided to charge us or quote us $6 billion for the design of the submarine. The design.
It's B for billion.
Billion. Now, the Collins...
$6 billion for the design.
$6 billion for the design. Now, the Collins-class submarines were made in Australia, 6 of them, for about $6 billion. That's not just the design, that was making them as well. You can get the back of an envelope and work out that they could employ 4,000 engineers at $300,000 a year for 4 years for that sort of money.
But where is
it costs you about $700 million to design a submarine, not $6 billion.
But there's no...
They're having a go at us. They're having a lend of us.
I mean, there's no competitive process here. Your report says you called it a flawed process that resulted in the costliest and most risky acquisition approach possible over an unacceptable time frame, and you quote, for political reasons stated that the submarines must all be built in Adelaide regardless of the cost. But have the contracts been signed?
Yes, it'll cost us about $430 million to break the contract. I think that's a bargain. I don't mind the idea in principle of building ships in Australia. The Anzac-class frigates were made in Williamtown and they were on time and on budget. The Collins-class submarine, eventually, they got it sorted out. They got it sorted out. But this French idea is just insane.
Well, your report has said this. The report estimates a whole-of-life cost, that's the key here, including acquisition, sustainment and the life extension of the Collins-class at $180 billion.
Yeah, it'll be that. Yeah.
Why, Graham, there's no debate, no discussion about any of this?
No, I haven't heard any of this.
Which is the reason we're doing it.
The big problem with the Westminster system is if when both sides, on opposite sides of Parliament, don't argue with each other, the Westminster system breaks down. Labor's gone doggo on this too.
Problems for me on this, I can remember being part of decisions on defence acquisitions in Cabinet, and you're not expert. You're not an expert. You don't know anything about a submarine. What do I know? I wouldn't know one end from the other.
Yep.
And so some boffins come in from defence, and they just deluge you with figures and
They snow you.
and you're sitting there not having a clue.
No.
That's the truth. Now, it's an unhappy truth, but it's the truth.
Well-
so what happens is cabinets make decisions when they have no idea of what the basis of the decision was. And what we have to do is start to work out a much better way, because Cabinet is not the place to decide where to buy a submarine.
Is that the ship, that the boat that is to be designed around, the nuclear boat, has just been launched. It actually exists, the nuclear vessel. It's not a bad boat. It's not a bad submarine.
These things have got to be retrofitted.
They've got to put a diesel in them, which is a joke.
Can't we have a nuclear-powered one? What's the great drama about having a nuclear-powered
Well, we need to grow up as a country to do that. Albo has just said that we're going to have retain our moratorium on nuclear power in Australia, which is a joke. We'd be far better off buying the French nuclear submarine. It's ex-stock. It's off the shelf. It's off the shelf. A diesel submarine, to get to its area of operation above Indonesia, has to come from Stirling in Perth. It takes about a month to get there. It does 4 knots. We can walk at 4 knots. It'd take us a month to get there even if we walked it. A nuclear submarine can do 30 knots underwater to get on station. The only thing stopping a nuclear submarine staying on station is that it'll run out of food eventually.
But we're buying something...
Around the world, can I ask you, how many of these diesel ones are being built? I mean, is anyone...
Never been built.
Nobody's building diesel submarines anymore.
We're buying...
We won't. Look, if ever we get them, we won't get the crew to run them, because there'll be no crew of any sense would go on them.